Friends and the Gaining Thereof, written by The Dark Elf, read for you by Charcoal Bits. Summary: Shota Aizawa planned for everything when he and his partner agreed to foster a kid. The only thing he didn't plan for was his kid making friends. Or, the 5 times Aizawa watched his kid make friends, and the one time it was a bit more than a friend. 1. Tenya Ida. Shota Aizawa thought he and his partner had thought of everything when they agreed to foster a traumatized child victim of a villain attack. They cleared out the spare bedroom Nemen Tensei would sometimes crash in after one too many drinks. Hizashi had nearly bought out the children's clothing department of anything in the child's size. Shota had made sure to grab a tablet with the most durable present mic case he could find and loaded every speech aid he could think of once they found out their child was selectively mute, so they could find which one they preferred to communicate with while they learned JSL. He had thought of everything. Except friends. Really, Tenya was the foregone conclusion. The minute Tensei heard they were fostering a child the same age as his younger brother, he had shown up to the next family dinner with little Tenya in tow. Shota knew Tenya, had babysat him since his second year in UA along with Tensei, Hisashi, and Nem. He had watched the kid take his first steps, and subsequently was there to watch Tensei panic as the kid's quirk came in, and he shot off like a rocket. Tenya Ida was as close to a nephew as Shota would ever get, and he would give his life before he let anything happen to the kid. Still, he was worried. Izuku was different, and while the Ida family was a family of mutant quirk users and heroes, they still had quirks. Izuku's quirk status added into his selective mutism and crippling social anxiety made Shota protective, to say the least. The minute Tensei and Tenya had walked into their apartment, Shota wanted to snatch away Izuku and run. His kid had already been hurt so much, and Shota would be damned before he let it happen again. He didn't need to be worried. Izuku's little fingers clutched at his tablet as he hid behind Hisashi's long legs, peeking out around them with barely contained excitement. It should have been comical. The sight of such a small child clothed in a massive put-your-hands-up radio hoodie, with sleeves cuffed over and over to show those little hands nearly vibrating as they bounced with ecstatic joy at seeing one of his best friends, who had come to dinner in jeans and his own hero merch. But Shota could only feel his chest warm with the affection at the sight. "You're Ingenium!" The mechanical voice of Izuku's tablet broke the silence, and Shota hit the slight upturning of his lips with a sip from his mug. He and Hisashi had spent hours programming every hero name they could think of into the damned app once they learned how much their kid loved quirks and heroes, and every minute of it had been worth it for the dumbstruck look on Tensei's face. "Yeah, that's me. You can call me Uncle Ten when I'm out of costume, though. Oh, and my sign name is this." Tensei shuffled the bags he was holding so he could sign Fast Blue. Izuku moved the tablet under one arm as they clumsily did the signs back, repeating them until Tensei smiled and nodded. "There you go. This is my little brother, Tenya. He's the same age as you." Shota watched with eagle eyes as Tenya stepped around his brother and dipped into a perfect bow to his child. "It is a pleasure to meet you. You may call me Tenya, as my family name would only be confusing with my brother present as well. My sign name is—" Tenya signed fast little with military-like precision. Izuku grinned and repeated the signs again before switching back to his tablet. "My name is Izuku. My sign name makes a lot more sense now. Did Zashi pick yours too?" Hisashi laughed and nodded. "We were all pretty stumped over Ten-Ten's sign name, but once his court came in, it just seemed to fit. We already called him Tensei Jr., so—" They shrugged. "Izuku's sign name is Green Little. It was only fair to keep the tradition going." From there, everything was smooth sailing as Hisashi ushered Tensei into the kitchen to drop the bags of takeout he had brought, as it was his turn for family dinner, and the man could be trusted to boil water. Shota was left with the kids as Izuku nervously dressed her to the living room. Fortunately, Tenya seemed to understand that his usual insistence on manners would be detrimental here, and simply followed Izuku without complaint. There were a tense few minutes, with the kids circling around each other, unsure of what to say, but then Izuku asked if Ingenium was Tenya's favorite hero, and the boy was thrilled as ever to talk about his brother. Shota found himself relaxing into his armchair as the familiar sound of Izuku's tablet blended with Tenya's voice and the sound of Hisashi and Tensei bickering over something in the kitchen. Maybe finding friends with Izuku wouldn't be so bad. Maybe Shota really was overreacting like Hisashi had claimed. Maybe... What is your quirk, Izuku-kun? Ice flooded Shota's veins at Tenya's innocent question. They had all raised Tenya to be open-minded of all quirks after Shota and Hisashi's issues with people labeling their quirks as villainous in the past. They had even stressed that quirklessness didn't make someone lesser than someone with a quirk. But with how some adults reacted to Izuku, he couldn't be sure. I don't have one. I'm going to be the first quirkless hero. Tenya blinked, then nodded. If anyone can help you achieve your goal, then it would be Uncle Sho and Bibi Zashi. Perhaps we'll be in the same class at UA. Izuku ducked their face with a soft smile and whispered, barely loud enough to be heard. Thank you, Ten-chan. Hearing his child's voice was enough to convince Shota that maybe friends weren't so bad after all. 2. Fumikage Tokoyami. Friends were a terrible idea, and Shota was a terrible father for thinking it would be otherwise. Tenya was a fluke. They were basically family anyway. No other kid would be as supportive and accepting as he was, and branching out was a mistake. Izuku frowned at the group of kids that ran off after telling them they couldn't play because they didn't talk. Normally, they could find at least one other kid in the park to play with on the days Tenya didn't come with them. But today it seemed like everybody knew something was wrong about them. Maybe it was the fact that Izuku was wearing a skirt rather than typical boy clothes. Maybe it was the fact that they took longer to respond because they had to use their tablet or find their dad to translate sign. Maybe it was the bright red shoes with the clear cue that announced that they were worthless to anyone who looked down. Not that it was all bad. The park was fun even if no one wanted to play with them. Maybe if they asked their dad would push them on the swings, which kind of felt like they were flying. They had just turned to find their dad when they spotted a little figure alone under one of the playsets. Izuku frowned. They often hid like that when the other kids were being mean. Why wasn't anyone helping them? Their dad and Yama always helped them when they got scared. That's why they were Izuku's favorite heroes. Izuku bit their lip before nodding and heading towards the figure. They were going to be a hero, so they had to act like a hero would. Ducking under the play furniture, Izuku knelt down a few feet away so they weren't looming and pulled out their tablet. They made sure the volume wasn't too loud before they started typing, not wanting to scare the other kid. My name is Izuku. Are you okay? As hard as they tried not to startle the other kid, they still jumped at the sudden voice. The kid's head popped up from where they were hiding it with their arms, and Izuku saw raven-like features sharpen in suspicion as the shadows around them seemed to grow darker. Izuku tried their hardest to keep the same open, friendly expression their Yama wore when they spoke to scared civilians, even though their hands started to shake just a little. The darkness, something they were too old to still be afraid of, after all. But Dad said the fear was logical after what they had been through. Fumikage Tokoyami. Izuku's hand was already flying over the tablet to ask their new friends if they wanted to play when one of the shadows seemed to solidify with the same bird-like features of Tokoyami. I'm Dark Shadow! Are you Fumi's new friend? Izuku blinked, and their hands fluttered over the keyboard as they tried to decide which question they wanted to ask first. But there were just so many, and it would take so long to type them out. Really, what else were they supposed to do other than drag Fumikage and Dark Shadow to their dad so he could play translator as Izuku's fingers stumbled over question after question? Shota wasn't exactly sure what to make of Tokoyami at first. The kid was just as serious as Tenya, but with an edge of goth that made it hard to believe he and Izuku got along so well. Yet, any doubts he might have had with their friendship were shattered after a week of them starting Aldera Middle School, when he got a call from a panicking Tokoyami saying that Izuku had been attacked and the teachers weren't doing anything about it. When he arrived, 2 sobbing kids and an enraged Dark Shadow protecting them both. He knew the 2 would be just as inseparable as Tenya and Izuku were. Or 3, really, as Dark Shadow loved Izuku just as much as she adored Tokoyami, and it wasn't uncommon to see her wrapped around Izuku's shoulders protectively. So Shota would accept 2 more friends for his kid. They had already proven that they had Izuku's best interests at heart after all. 3. Hitoshi Shinso. Shota would have gladly written Izuku's recommendation for UA. Hisashi would have done it with a grin. Neither of them would be willing if they weren't absolutely sure that Izuku could handle it. But they both had been training with them since they were a kid, and knew better than anyone that Izuku would be the greatest hero Japan had ever seen. Izuku told them they wanted to take the normal exams. They should have expected it. Izuku was stubborn as both of them, with Shota's fuck the world attitude, masked under Hisashi's glittering personality. Their kid wanted to show Yue's biased test wasn't only going to let through the flashy, heroic quirks, but that the first quirkless student to apply in UA history would get into the hero course with all the odds stacked against them. That, and they thought it would be unfair if they were recommended when Fumikage and Tenya weren't. A saint. Shota was raising a saint with all the mischief that came with his problem child. So when exam day finally rolled around, he was unsurprised to see Tenya and Fumikage on either side of his kid. What was surprising was the amount of hate in their glares at a certain blonde boy who was glaring back at them with just as much vitriol. He would have to keep an eye on that if the boy made it through the practical. Waiting with bated breath for Hisashi to announce the practical. Shota had to hide his smile and his capture weapon, as Izuku was the only one to respond to Hisashi's callouts. The kid had come so far from whispering barely loud enough to be heard to screaming, "Yeah!" in a crowded auditorium. He had to bite back a laugh when Dark Shadow joined on in the next one, much to Fumikage's disappointment, if the fluffed-up feathers were to be believed. The battle zones were handed out. Tenya and Izuku in the same one, while Fumikage was in a separate one. As much as the boy was logical enough to allow Izuku to shine on his own, Dark Shadow had a protective streak from the Aldera incident. That being said, Shota would rather have chewed glass than allow Izuku to enter a battle zone without any backup. And the kids parted with stiff nods, Tenya and Fumikage, and enthusiastic hugs and wishes of good luck, Izuku and Dark Shadow, to get changed into their athletic clothes for the practical. No, Shota wasn't feeling sentimental when his kid walked out of the changing room with his own capture weapon wrapped around his shoulders and a feral grin firmly on his face. And if Nam kept saying he was going to shove her out of the observation room window. Izuku's eyes scanned over the applicants, barely being stopped by Tenya before he could approach a purple-haired boy who looked decidedly green. Shota knew that look, and had a glance at the kid's file confirmed it. Mental quirk, little physical training. The kid had almost no chance of passing, and he knew it. It was only Hisashi announcing the start of the test that got Izuku to stop pouting at Tenya and dart between the other applicants into the cityscape without hesitation. They knew that heroics wouldn't give them a countdown. They knew that they had to use every advantage they had in order to pass this test against the odds. Purple Kid, Shinso, knew it too, and was the third to enter the city after Tenya had shaken himself out of his stupor at Izuku's rare glare. Shota split his attention between Tenya, Izuku, and Shinso. While he couldn't grade two of them due to bias, he would be damned if he let them go off without paying some form of attention. There had never been a death during the entrance exams, but kids got hurt enough every year that Shota was keeping a close eye on his kids. Nem had already promised to watch Fumikage in the other battle zone so he could focus on the other two littles their fucked-up family had claimed. Izuku was in his element, years of training with his capture weapon making it almost second nature to swing around buildings and throw rocks into each other to rack up points. Tenya was kicking his way through robots in a blur of constant motion that was so similar to Tensei that Shota had to glance at his elbows to make sure he was looking at the right Ida. Shinso had found a metal pipe that had been a part of something, and was currently beating the shit out of a two-pointer with feral delight. Fuck. Shota wanted him in his class. He would get him in his class, even if he had to tweak the scores himself. Surprisingly, it looked like he might not have to, as Shinso jumped from the downed two-pointer and yanked a blonde kid who was currently dry-heaving out of the way of an incoming three-pointer. Shota watched the kids' point counters increase as they caused carnage and saved their fellow applicants. He laughed outright when Izuku's capture weapon wrapped around a boy who was leering at one of the girls and threw him out of the way of a two-pointer. Vlad looked decidedly gray as he looked between Izuku on the screen and Shota's grin. Then the zero-pointer was released, and all hell broke loose. All of the applicants ran for cover as the giant robot entered the arena. All of them but his kids and a girl trapped under a piece of rubble. Izuku was already running in with their capture weapon at the ready. 10. Purple. Use this pipe as a lever to get her out, they commanded, green eyes filled with determination as the scarf wrapped around a streetlight in preparation to throw themselves in the air. And what the hell are you doing? Shinso yelled back, even as he ran forward to wedge the pipe under the rubble as Tenya moved to grab the girl under her shoulders, ready to pull her out once her leg was no longer pinned. Plan B! With that, Izuku launched himself into the air, capture weapon unwinding from the light only to wrap around the arm of the zero-pointer and send Izuku sailing up to the thing's head, where they ripped open an access panel. The observation room was dead silent as they all watched Shinso and Tenya free the girl and get her settled piggyback on Tenya, just as Izuku went elbow deep into the robot's head and ripped out a fistful of wires. The boys backed up as the zero-pointer came to a stop, only to gasp and lurch forward when it jerked its head enough to send Izuku tumbling from the thing's head. Shoto wasn't sure when he jumped to his feet. He wasn't sure when Nem had crossed the room to grip at his arm tight enough for her nails to cut into the skin. He wasn't sure if he was hearing Zashi scream as their kid fell, or if it was his own mind screaming to save their baby. Then Izuku's capture weapon caught, and they hit the ground in a roll that was just a touch too hard, if how they winced when they stood was any indication. Shinso laughed, slightly hysterically, and moved to drape Izuku's arm over his shoulders. The zero-pointer began to tip. Izuku's eyes went wide as they motioned Tenya on, and wrapped their arm tighter around Shinso. The capture weapon caught on a fire escape, and the two of them were flying, barely missing the robot as it fell. Zashi called time, and Izuku and Shinso collapsed in a heap where they landed, Shinso only managing to take the force of the fall so Izuku's hurt leg wouldn't. Tenya wasn't far behind. After easing the girl to the ground, he fell to his knees next to the pile and wrapped Izuku in a hug. You two are insane, you know that, Shinso asked with a laugh, letting his head fall back onto the broken concrete. Like you're not? I saw you beating a robot with a stick, Purple. Tenya opened his mouth to translate Izuku's signing, but Shinso was already laughing and signing back. Fair enough, Green Bean. Shota had a stinking suspicion that his kid had just made a new friend. 4. Shoto Todoroki. Shota knew the second that Izuku realized Todoroki was only using half of his quirk that he would be the next conquest on his child's crusade to befriend everyone he had ever met. Poor Todoroki never stood a chance. Shota would have felt bad for the kid if the same thing hadn't happened to him by his own human ray of sunshine. Really, it was only fair that someone else got bulldozed by the friendship in the same way he had. Todoroki had even said the words, "I'm not here to make friends." That was the moment Shota knew this poor kid would crumble like a house of cards in the face of Hurricane Izuku. He only wished Izuku would have made friends with him less dramatically. There was something off about their dynamic from the moment the sports festival started. Particularly with how Hitoshi, Tenya, and Fumikage were all gunning for Todoroki with a vengeance normally saved for Bakugo. Everything had seemed normal enough in the week leading up to the sports festival, even with the boys being so protective over Izuku after their injuries at the USJ. So Shota could only assume the kid had put his foot in his mouth just before the event first started. A glance at the crowd explained why, as Endeavor towered over everyone with his fire beard burning hot enough that there were several empty seats around him as the heat drove people away. Nothing really happened between the kids in the first event. Izuku was going to be grounded forever for pulling that stunt with the mines, even if Shota would have done the exact same thing. Especially since Shota would have done the exact same thing. And the second round's only real surprise was Todoroki using his fire. Shota should have expected that his luck of his kid not hurting himself in order to make a friend would run out. Most of the fight between Todoroki and Izuku was obscured from view by the wall of ice that surrounded the two of them. Shota wasn't worried. Why would he be? Izuku's best friends had only declared a personal vendetta against Todoroki, who seemed to be getting more and more aggressive with each winning bringing him closer to the win. What was there to worry about? Then the ice wall melted with a sudden burst of fire, and Izuku's unconscious body rocketed out of the ring into the far wall. Todoroki looked gutted as he staggered forward just as Nem ran onto the field to check on Izuku and then call the match in Todoroki's favor. Heterochromatic eyes followed the Medbots as they took Izuku off the field into the temporary infirmary Recovery Girl had set up. For winning the match, Todoroki looked like he had lost something far more important. Later, when Shota walked into the infirmary to check on his kid, Todoroki was there with the others minus Tenya. All the previous tension had eased between the boys, though that might have something to do with Todoroki's split lip and Hitoshi's bloody knuckles. The boy looked vaguely confused as he looked between Hitoshi's frantically signing fingers to calm Izuku's frenzied typing on his tablet to Fukikame's calm acceptance of the chaos. That was his friends. None of them seemed to mind as Dark Shadow emerged to press against Izuku in a quick check before sprawling all over Todoroki and Hitoshi's laps, demanding pets. Yeah, Todoroki had never stood a chance. 5. Class 1A. From there, it was difficult to pinpoint when Izuku started collecting the others in their class as friends. Maybe it was Kota, who was thrilled to have 4 people who understood sign language, and who cried when Izuku gifted him with a tablet much like his own, so he could speak to their classmates who didn't know sign language, even when one of them wasn't around to translate. Maybe Yaoyorozu was the first, with how she bonded with Izuku over teas and blended perfectly in with Tenya as the responsible one. Probably more so than Tenya after the Hosu incident, to temper the pure feral energy that was Izuku and Hitoshi. Maybe it was Uraraka, who had been orbiting around their friend group since the beginning, who was only really accepted after Izuku snapped at Bakugo for calling them Deku one too many times, and she finally realized that it was a cute nickname after all. Maybe it was Kaminari, who had fallen for Shinso the minute they saw the boy, and who bonded with Izuku over how the female uniforms were more comfortable, but the male uniforms let them kick ass easier. Maybe it was Shoji, who stuck close to Fumikage and seemed to enjoy the other boy's dark outlook on the world, for all he teased the bird-headed boy for being too poetic in his words. Maybe it was Jiro, who shared Izuku's and Hisashi's love of pre-quirk American music, and could often be found sharing an earbud with Izuku while they studied. Maybe it didn't matter who was first, only that these 20 broken kids all found each other and declared that they were a family. Class 1A had been through more than any first-year class in UA history, and they came back through each challenge stronger than before because they had each other at their backs. As much as Shota hated that his Hell class and his kid were at the center of everything that had gone wrong in the last year, he was also thankful that it had brought all of them so close together. Thankful that every time he heard Izuku laughing loudly at one of Todoroki's dry remarks that was almost a joke. Thankful when Shinso was able to ask a question out loud in class without flinching afterwards. Thankful when Tenya wheeled his brother around the dorms after Tensei had spoken to them about the reality of becoming a retired hero. Thankful when he ran into the common room after another nightmare of something happening to his Hell class to find them already out there, all piled on top of each other, with a space to Izuku saved for him. Friends were something Shota Aizawa had never planned for his problem child, but he was so grateful that Izuku had found them on their own. +1. More than friends. Fumikage. Hey, Dad? How did you know you liked Yama more than a friend? Shota knew the day would come eventually, but knowing didn't make him want to slam his head into the nearest counter any less. He took a few slow breaths as he glared into his coffee mug. Of all the people for Izuku to go for emotions he chose, Shota, and as illogical as it might be, Shota would do anything for his kid. Even give relationship advice. I didn't at first, really. Tensei was the one who pointed out how I acted differently with Zashi than I did with him and Nem. Shota thought about his next words carefully as he looked between the mug and his kid's earnest green eyes. Then, once he pointed it out, I couldn't stop noticing it. When Zashi would smile, and it was like every shitty thing in my day got better. When they were upset, I wanted to punch whoever caused it, myself included. I found myself going out to clubs or going dancing with them because it would make them smile. Shota's lips tugged into a small smile as he thought about all the times their friends had called him out on going to a club with them even when he hated it. But it was always worth it to see Zashi smile as they wrapped their arms around his neck and pulled him into the dance floor. So you wanted to make them happy no matter what? That, yes. And as much as Zashi annoyed me, I couldn't stay mad at them. And trust me, I tried. Izuku giggled into their mug of tea, probably thinking about the many times over the years that Shota had tried valiantly to be irritated at his partner and just couldn't. How did you tell them? Shota snorted and put his mug on on the table. What makes you think I told them? He asked, raising an eyebrow. Izuku raised one right back. Yama is a disaster and would have pined forever rather than risk making you uncomfortable. That got a laugh out of Shota. He knew his kid was smart and perceptive, but most of the time it was hidden behind sunshine smiles and bubbly attitude. All of it was Zashi's doing. Shota thought they both found it funny how many people underestimated them. You're not wrong, though I don't think my way will help you with confessing to Tokiyami. Shota reveled in the startled yelp that got from Izuku. At least he wouldn't be the only one uncomfortable during this conversation. What? Who? Izuku stammered, flailing around as they struggled to get the words out of through their sudden embarrassment. Shota fought the urge to sigh, not an annoyance, never annoyance, but at whoever had taken his kid's ability to be playfully teased without stealing their words away. Izuku had come so far, but there would still be times when speaking just wasn't until the cards for them, and knocked on the table. Deep breath, problem child. Use your signs if it's easier. Izuku took a deep breath. In 4, hold 5, out 7, just as Shota had coached them through time and time again, and smiled sheepishly as their hands began to sign. How did you know? I have eyes, problem child. I had a feeling you would fall for Tokoyami from the minute you dragged the poor kid to me to translate your interrogation. Izuku stuck their tongue out, which did nothing to hide how red their cheeks were. Zashi would be cooing and calling them a strawberry if they weren't at the station. Do you think he knows? I think everyone knows. I think everyone but him knows. I overheard Jiro and Shoju planning on locking you two in a room if they didn't get figured out soon. His kid let out a dramatic groan and threw himself over the table in a sprawl that screamed to Murray. He really had to stop letting her and Zashi corrupt his kid like this. If you want my advice, problem child, just talk to him. That kid adores you with everything he is, and even if he didn't, the worst thing that happens is that he doesn't like you romantically and things are a little awkward for a while. He won't leave you, and he sure as hell won't hate you, or whatever illogical outcome you have brewing in your mind. Green eyes peeked over a scarred arm, looking a bit sheepish. Shota reached out and rested a hand on top of the riot of green curls, running his fingers in them the way he knew it made Izuku relax. He cares about your kid, and if he fucks up, I'll kick his ass. Izuku laughed loud enough to scare the cats. And later, if he saw Izuku curled into Fumikage's side, with one of the boys' arms wrapped around their shoulders and dark shadows sprawled across their laps, he definitely didn't smile, no matter what Zashi claimed. Hey guys, wow. Was not expecting to finish this one shot the same day I posted a spoiler for it. Um, I'm just an overachiever that has a fear of disappointing the people that I care about, and I care about you guys, so I felt like if I didn't get this out, I'd be disappointing you. I'm sorry for overthinking. Anyways, hope you're all having a lovely day today. How was your guys' day? Mine was fine. I went to school, stuff like that. Anyways, if you guys have any recommendations or suggestions for any other one shots you want to see on the channel, uh please feel free to leave them in the comments. I want to keep doing one shots like this in between every episode, or like 2 episodes of If We're Being Honest, or whenever I do a series, just so I don't get bored. Um, I think I'm planning on doing either Viridian, the Green Guide by Clouds, My Head in the Clouds Not Coming Down, or this other series. I can't remember the name of it right now, but I really loved it. So I'll keep you guys posted on that. So also, I'm planning on finishing, if we're being honest, by before the end of April. So yeah, so just look out for any new updates of that. Um, I'll rewatch it this time so I make sure that I don't have any parts that are repeating themselves again. Um, anyways, other than that, have a nice day. Drink some water, eat some food. Coffee does not count as a meal. Goodbye.